Improving the NXL Part 2. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about the upper half of the NXL, which is semi-pro, pro, and Major League Paintball. And there are ways to help make this improve, I believe, to continue the growth of paintball. Hello everyone, and welcome to Old Guy Paintball. I'm Craig, and I am your host. In a quick recap, last week I discussed the NXL in general, mostly divisional play, in areas to, I think, could make it even better than what it is in this current situation. So if you get a chance and you haven't watched that video, when you get done with this one, go back to last week's episode and watch that. In this week's episode, I want to talk about the upper half of the NXL, and it's kind of a new iteration of Major League Paintball, or MLP. First of all, I want to say is, like many, I'm not exactly sure what Major League Paintball really is. It seems to be something that came out of an idea when they announced that they're going to be on ESPN, and I think they came up with this idea of this name to make it sound like paintball's a professional sport or something that, ooh, it's new and, hey, jump on board. And we're really kind of not really knowing what it is. NXL still operates the pro division, and it has MLP. But I'm going to tell you what I think here shortly, what I think MLP can become, and ways to make paintball even better. A lot of things I'll talk about will kind of somewhat reflect a little bit of last week's episode, and some of these same issues I think that's in the divisional play also affect the upper half of the NXL. I like the current format where the team that finishes last in Major League Paintball gets relegated or demoted back to semi-pro, and the top semi-pro team gets elevated into the pro division. But one of the problems that's been happening the past few years is teams that have come in second or third in the semi-pro division want to move up and didn't get there, so they either buy into another team's franchise or take that franchise spot over, or they've merged and formed new teams to get in there. And this has kind of been a problem because one of the things that has happened in the past few years is teams that have been elevated or have done and bought into the new pro division have struggled, and usually after a year, maybe two, at the most three, have either sold their positions to somebody else, merged, or just, dropped out of it. And a lot of that has to do is with costs. I have no idea what it costs to run a pro paintball team, but a rough guess is it's probably got to be close to $100,000. The time you figure to pay for people to fly all over the country for practices and tournaments and gear and things like that, it's not a cheap endeavor. And we all know that there's certain top teams that seem to have a budget that can afford to actually pay their players, so that is their kind of main source of income. But overall, the term pro paintballer really is just a name in itself. Most people have regular jobs and work to help pay for their paintball, but it is a big commitment because you're generally practicing at least once a month in a scrimmage format against other pro teams, which involves a lot of travel, not to mention the tournaments themselves. And I think that this has caused one of the bigger issues with paintball is because it lacks the sponsorship to handle the pro division. And one of the issues I've seen with the pro division is in that, like most sports, you have a lot of outside sponsors. And paintball has very rarely gone after that. They try to support themselves within their own. And if the paintball is going to grow as a sport, and especially to be on ESPN here more in the future or another channel, it's going to have to start to attract outside sponsorship. And this would be a huge benefit to the pro division, because if the prize money will allow players to really devote more of their lives to paintball, then the teams that are new will be able to last potentially a lot longer because the income source will be there. The second problem that runs into with new teams is after a year or two, if you have good players, they tend to get pilfered by other teams. And I don't blame a player for jumping up from a lower top or a bottom 15 team up into a top 10 team. I mean, that's smart for your career. But the problem is most smaller teams cannot absorb the loss of 2 or 3 players and expect to be competitive. They're basically right back into a semi-pro or even possibly a Division II level team. And that's another thing I think that they have, Major League Paintball and the NXL should address is if a team moves up, there should be a off limits of going after players for 2 years or so. This way it gives a team at least 2 years to compete with their group and possibly develop some talent in a Division II or semi-pro format as a feeder system, or at least keep the team together to maybe they can get better, more competitive, which will attract better sponsorship for them and attention. So teams that are getting picked apart quickly fall apart quickly. And it's kind of like it is in a lot of other sports. The good teams get better and the bad teams, well, they just don't ever get better. So this is something I think paintball has to address as a whole. And the next section is, like a lot of people, I'm not actually sure what Major League Paintball really is. It's very confusing. It's kind of somewhat on its own and yet not. What I'd like to see in the future is Major League Paintball spun off into its own entity, and that should be the pro division. And I think the semi-pro should take top tier or top spot in NXL if they continue the regional tournament action or format. And Major League Paintball could strictly be all the pro teams. It'd be a single event with just pro teams there. I think this would be a huge benefit for paintball. If you just had pro teams, then you're going to have a chance to really look at the best players out there. And let's face it, if you go to a NXL event, most of the time people want to watch the best players play. You might catch a semi-pro team to see who's up and coming, but rarely do people just run over and check out divisional play unless they're involved in it or they have a friend in it. But in the old days, like I mentioned, there used to be stands on both sides, and it seemed to be a fairly well, almost stadium-like event. And I think paintball needs to get back at that if it wants to be considered a professional sport and grow as a professional sport. So it may be it's time to spin Major League Paintball into its own entity with the pro teams and their own circuit separate from the current NXL divisional regional series. And this would be huge for paintball because imagine the focus that was just on pro paintball. You could move the pits to either end of the field and have stands on both sides, whether you want to have a general admission on one side and preferred on the other or something. More people could attend to it, and it could be at different venues. And also, it wouldn't take very much space to have a pro field and maybe just a practice field. And, there'd be a lot better interaction for people to see and what goes on and talk to players and things like that. I just think it's a win-win to make Major League Paintball a single entity with its own series and own dates and everything. And at the end, if you want to combine it with NXL's World Cup, that's totally fine. But I think 5 matches or 5 events would be a great start. And eventually, maybe it could get the sponsorship and expand to be 6, 7, or 8 months, 1 tournament a month, and players can make good money and actually be professional athletes and move forward as a professional sport, which will attract, again, more sponsors, which means continually more money and a better product. I just think that that's one way paintball is going to have to grow. If not, I think it's going to continue to flatline and just kind of be this, so-so kind of sport that kind of has little peaks here and there, because we have to change the format here sooner or later if we want to be recognized. I know recently that even in college sports, they're trying to revamp the college program to get it back going. And I think something similar could be done with that as well and help tie that into pro paintball. But I hope you enjoyed this past 2 episodes. It's just my general thoughts and my general feelings on the current state of paintball as it exists, getting ready for the 2025 season. And what can we do this year to make paintball better, to grow the sport, get more people involved, and just make it more fun again. I hope you liked this episode as well. And if you did, please hit the like, comments down below. And also, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss out any of my current content that I have planned for the future. And also, don't forget about my poll in my community section. Take a second, go over there, and please check them out. But with that, I hope everyone has enjoyed so far their off season and the moves, and we're all looking forward to paintball in 2025, and I'll see you on the paintball field soon.